How's it going, everyone? It's Harvey from Weather Sponge 5000, and in this video, we're going to talk about the Atlantic hurricane season, more specifically, this disturbance right here, and determine if this does have a legitimate chance of developing into Tropical Storm Danielle, as it seems like the chance has risen as of the latest GFS model run, where now the GFS model wants to develop this tropical disturbance into a little bit of a more powerful low pressure zone, to a point where this could be considered Tropical Storm Danielle as early as next week. But before I begin, make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather-related content. So let's begin. I'll take a look at the current GFS model run, the latest one, the 18Z run, which is just coming out as we speak. And if we were to take a look at that, pretty much you're going to see that the low pressure system that the GFS model wants to develop a well-defined low pressure system, which is quite a big difference compared to its previous runs, where the GFS model run wasn't very lenient on developing any sort of well-defined center of circulation. But now we're seeing that from the GFS model, and not only that, if we were to head further into the future, headed into the 90 to maybe the 5-day mark, we do see that the low pressure system does strengthen down to around 1,006 millibars at its peak, which could be considered at least a tropical depression or tropical storm, depending on if there's strong enough winds throughout the center of circulation. And if there's a small enough center of circulation, we have to really determine if that will occur as this moves westward. But in terms of strength, in terms of millibar pressure strength, this could easily be considered a tropical storm as this heads further westward. So this could potentially be Tropical Storm Danielle. As of right now, the National Hurricane Center still isn't forecasting any sort of tropical cyclone development within the next 5 days, but I wouldn't be surprised within the next few hours, or potentially into tomorrow, or even the next coming days, we could see that change, as now the latest GFS model run coming out is now more lenient on developing a tropical storm right around the main development region. And the European model isn't so far. And you see, well, first let me show you guys that it is 120 hours out, so it's more certain than what I've been forecasting in my previous videos, where I was forecasting this well beyond the 120 hour mark, which made it more uncertain. But now we're within that range, within that 5-day range, where the forecast does become more certain to begin to at least be aware of this low pressure system and the possibility that a tropical storm could develop. Because if we're forecasting this, let's say beyond the 5-day mark, yeah, the uncertainty is so high to a point where you might not necessarily need to pay attention to it. But now, since it's within the 5-day window, it's suddenly something you need to pay more close attention to when talking about the Atlantic hurricane season and potentially the Caribbean islands as this continues to head further westward. So now it's definitely more under the radar, this tropical disturbance, and we're gonna have to keep a close eye on this over the next several days. And the European model, like I said, isn't very far off from what the GFS model is stating, because if we were to take a look at the European model and the GFS model both pretty much agree that there's going to be a lot of thunderstorm activity just south of the Cape Verde Islands. And if I were to move even more forward, we do see that there's going to be another low pressure system to the to the east of it, that's going to move a little bit faster and potentially give this storm a little bit more extra fuel to drop its millibar pressure, which is certainly a possibility if I were to continue to move forward. We do see that the low pressure systems eventually merge, but the thing with the European model is that the European model isn't expecting as strong a low pressure system, because the European model, well, the GFS model is forecasting this low pressure system to drop at least 1,006 millibars. The European model at its peak intensity is around 1,007, but you see that there isn't a lot of thunderstorm activity surrounding that this specific low pressure system, which doesn't really which may mean that this necessarily won't be strengthened into be considered tropical storm status when there is barely tropical activity around the center circulation, like a lot of convection, let's say, to really create a small center circulation. So the GFS model is more lenient on developing a tropical storm at this point than the European model, but both overall are still weak tropical storms. Don't get me wrong, but the GFS model is just strong enough, and we're seeing close center circulation that's just small enough to the point where the GFS model does have a slightly is leaning more towards developing a tropical storm than the European model, which is kind of a switch of roles here, because the European model was always a more lenient one over the past several days of bringing low pressure systems to the main developed region, but now it seems like the GFS model is more lenient on tropical cyclone development in the main developed region. However, one of the factors that will really determine if this the GFS model wants to develop Tropical Storm Danielle or not. So if we were to take a look first at the relative humidity, it's going to deal with some dry air, which I think could be a big inhibiting factor with this, because if I were to continue to move forward, as of right now, this low pressure system is closed off in a pretty large envelope of moisture, so it is shielded for now from the dry air, and so it does have the possibility to strengthen into a tropical storm during this time frame. However, associated with this low pressure system that's just to the west of it, there's a lot of dry air ahead of it, and that could get entrained into the center of circulation, which could inhibit enough convection for a tropical storm to develop. And while this storm does strengthen despite the low pressure system bringing dry air, you see that beyond this point it doesn't really have much of a future, because you see that the dry air just completely swallows it as it continues to move westward. This could change because this is going beyond the 120-hour mark, but it just seems like there's a little bit too much of stable air for it to have a large chance of maintaining its strength as it heads further westward. But we need to wait and see, because that could easily change depending on how strong the northwesterly flow is associated with this Bermuda Azores high to really determine how much dry air there will be in the main developed region. So that's a factor we're going to need to pay close attention to. And another thing too is, of course, a location of where this low pressure system develops. So as of right now, the GFS model is wanting to strengthen a tropical storm that's just south of the Cape Verde Islands, southwest of this Cape Verde Islands. So at this point, it is currently over 80-degree plus water, which is warm enough to support for tropical cyclone development. However, we do see that it takes quite a dramatic turn north a little bit, and this could be an issue for the low pressure system, because if it were to move a little bit further northward, that's when the water temperatures cool down to below 80 degrees, which would stabilize the air a little bit around the low pressure system for not enough convection to occur for this to maintain its strength as it heads westward. If this were to move northward, which still has yet to be seen, of course the ridging could change over the next several days. However, it's the same thing with the European model. The European model is expecting this storm to primarily stay northward, as well as this moisture, and we do see the dry air swallow up this envelope of moisture as it heads westward. So as of right now, it's not looking like this will have a very long-term future if Tropical Storm Danielle were to develop, but there's still a lot of uncertainty to really say if the dry air will really completely kill off this storm. We have to just wait and see, but it seems more likely than ever before that Tropical Storm Danielle could develop somewhere in the main developed region. So it's at least something to keep in mind, especially in the Cape Verde Islands and even the Caribbean. Even if this doesn't develop, there's still that possibility that this moisture associated with Tropical Storm Danielle, or the remnants of it, could impact you guys and bring some flooding. So it's at least something to be aware of around the Caribbean. So make sure to keep that in mind. And If we were to take a look at the sea surf temperatures right now, you see that north of the Cape Verde Islands, or right around it, or a little bit further south of the Cape Verde Islands, you see that sea surf temperatures are just under 80 degrees. It's right around the when it comes to Celsius, if you're in the yellows or in sea surf temperatures above 26 degrees Celsius, that's considered above 80 degree water. And you see that if this low pressure system were to move north of the yellows and the oranges, and it would move into slightly cooler than 80 degree water, right around the high 70 degree water, which wouldn't be enough convection, which wouldn't create enough convection for the low pressure system to maintain strength as it heads further westward. So it's definitely something to keep in mind when it comes to a track forecast as well, to really determine if this will develop. In terms of the ensemble members, we do see that this computer model right here is developing a well-defined low pressure system, and it's fairly weak for the most part. It seems like most computer models aren't expecting necessarily a strong tropical storm as of right now. That could change, but now with the GFS model more lenient on developing a well-defined low pressure system, the chance of a tropical storm has dramatically increased in the main developed region. And if I were to show you guys what the GFS model is stating, let me actually update this cycle to the 18Z run. It's coming out right now, the spaghetti models. We do see that the GFS model is at least developing a well-defined low pressure system. I will still say that the chance Tropical Storm Danielle is currently low, but I wouldn't be surprised if that does rise over the next several days. Now, here's my forecast when it comes to Tropical Storm Danielle. Pretty much the same, pretty much going in this sort of track. It could easily die out by the time it approaches anywhere close to the Caribbean islands. We're just gonna need to determine how much dry air there will be. So make sure to at least be aware of this, that Tropical Storm Danielle could be more possible head into next week. But anyways, guys, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to subscribe if you want to see more weather content, and I hope you guys all have a great day.